Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Um, I wanted to talk to you about why it's important to love your kids. And a lot of this is what I'm getting from is from my own childhood and how my parents made mistakes in some regards. I don't blame them for those mistakes. I just know that simply as they could have been done better. But I think these were things that mistakes in my parents' background could actually help those who are having kids or have children now. And some of the things I would like to suggest to you is simply as I've shared here recently, is to let your kids get them out of the house. Just get them out of your house. Let them play. Let them play. Let them get in the backyard and play. Let them play in the mud, the dirt, because it's critical for them to build their own immune system, especially in our day of time. Simply, as we have such poor food and such poor even sleep habits for children, it's important that they actually get a chance to go outside and play and be in the elements, the to have trees to play on. I work in a area for a particular guy where here in Aiken, and it's a great subdivision per se. It's a big, huge. It's a big subdivision, probably more than I assume probably more than 400 or 500 houses, but they were all built in the 1950s and the early 60s, and they were built with the trees there intact. In other words, the trees were not taken up. And I remember this happened about 2 or 3 months ago. Um, a neighbor moved in right beside the guy that I work for, and he he cut these beautiful two trees in the front yard. He cut them down, and he actually cut them down and actually got rid of the roots and everything. And it was sad because simply as it ruined the looks of the house aesthetically on the outside. But the point simply is it was someone from California. Of all the crazy things, yes, the person who moved in was from California and apparently doesn't have any respect or love for trees. And so they cut the beautiful two trees in the front yard. And the sad fact about this house is that this has probably been 7 years ago, maybe a little less. Older gentleman lived there at this house, and I was working in the backyard, and I would talk to him a little bit. He had his own. Had a beautiful garden in the backyard, a really beautiful garden, and he had another tree in the backyard. And the first people that came in there cut that tree down, disposed of the garden, didn't want anything to do with it. And these are all younger people. These are all younger people than this man. This man I think he passed away at 95 or 96 years old. He could still speak to me. We talked about certain things. Just a beautiful person in many ways. He was gifted in some ways. He worked at a plant here in Aiken. He also was able to solve some problems with a roof with a public high school here and how to deal with it. And all that wisdom and knowledge is gone. And then the people who moved in that house just simply got rid of the trees. And so I think if you can find a house, if you have some young toddlers, it's a beautiful thing for them to have trees in the backyard, for them to be able to climb the trees, do things that what I did as a youngster. And I lived out in the country, and we had the opportunity as little boys at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 11 years old, we would go in the back part of the yard and play. And then not only that, simply as we would go into the woods that were owned by someone else. That was a gentleman that had cows, and there was a spring there. There was a brook, and we would watch. Me and my brother would watch the salamanders, and involved in the woods. So we had a good time. We created games to play, uh, which is something that no one, well, very few kids do these days. If there are games, they're all on a stinking computer. They're no longer played outside, and they destroy creativity. They destroy creativity with kids, their imagination. They've destroyed all that. And I know that even in my neighborhood here, I guess it's probably 7 years ago, we had, maybe a little longer than that, we had some snow to fall here. And I went up the road because I knew there was some kids that lived in these homes. And I observed, and there was no kids out and playing in the snow. No kids at all. I observed simply as I would go and I said, I was, rode around as this, I was working somewhere temporarily, and I was working at a computer shop. And I remember simply as I observed, and there would be no kids outside playing in the snow. None of them. And it told me how society has changed dramatically. I remember in the 1990s they were pushing these ideas of computers being in the classroom, and I was very much against this. I knew that this would be detrimental to the students because I knew simply is that how I worked. Computers can be very helpful, but to keep your sense of remembering things, I can remember phone numbers and how to make a profit sometimes without using a calculator in my own head because I used it, because I used my mind, and how computers make things better in some ways, but also make us more dependent. So I would encourage parents to look for areas. If you're looking and you have young children, it's enormously important that you find a place that for your kids, especially in a backyard, so they can play and enjoy and to imagine things, to dream, and not to have some toys always, that doesn't really solve that problem, you know. And I pointed out in my earlier video today is that it's so critical that moms and dads would listen to their children and that they would be so involved with what I would call trying to get ahead. That is, trying to have all this stuff, that the material stuff, as though they're trying to they are trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's what they're doing. They are trying to keep up with the Joneses and have this section of, such and such, and they're missing they are losing the ability, or not losing the ability. They are not aware that the children need to have a place to go and to imagine. And I know there's dangerous places, there's people that are bad, such and such, da da da. But you can actually put a privacy fence in their backyard, and they can play still in the backyard, and that they would probably be far safer that way. But this is how we've gone from, we spoil our kids by buying all these toys that these so-called people are experts on toys or computers as they are, or whatever, smart games or smartphones, whatever you want to call it, all these things for them. When reality simply is it doesn't solve the connectedness with the child and the parent. Is how what I would call a sad situation in a way that basically mommy and daddy just don't have time for their kids anymore. And mommy and daddy, a lot of times, simply as I shared earlier in another video of the day, simply is maybe it would good to deal with your traumas before you get married, have a partner, because in reality, simply is you're causing issues when you bring that into a family and you have kids. And so it's critical that you spend time with your kids. It's also critical simply is that you don't spoil your kids by giving them everything, because that creates an attitude of them being dependent upon you instead of themselves being dependent on themselves. I'm also in favor simply is if you can do it, get your kids out of public schools, get them out. I also am not in favor of private schools neither. Private schools are just as bad as public schools. A lot of it's groupthink. It is. A lot of it's groupthink. And most of the private schools are teaching the same curriculum that the public schools are because they're being forced to. And if they're telling you not, they're lying to you. Okay? And most of the teachers who are teachers are trained in public schooling themselves, or they went to a college and learned how to educate your children. And so they're teaching a perspective that's not valuable for your kids. So I'm in favor of what I call uneducation, unschooling. I believe the child I believe the child is smart enough to pursue its interests and what it likes. I believe wholeheartedly for that. I believe that they have interests in what they enjoy. And so if they enjoy history, then you buy them history books. If they have interest in science or being out in biology, then of course let them play. Let them get specimens of butterflies and let them be engaged with birds or watch the squirrels in the backyard. Those things, if they have that desire, you see. So unschooling is what I would propose. In fact, I not only propose it, I back it. I believe it's the best thing that you can do for your child, because they know better. They can be connected to their essence by this, because they're in nature. And they can come to the values of what I would call respecting nature and loving nature for what it is. You see, when they see these things, it makes them feel, and they are not so critical, and they realize this is life. You see, the same way with a garden. Let them explore into our garden and do these things. To learn how to plant seeds and to cultivate them and watch them grow. And let them take the responsibility of doing certain things, you see. And part of it simply is having a pet. Another thing that they would learn, teach them the responsibilities that they feed that animal, a dog or cat, and spend time with it. I think that's critical also, that parents will allow that to happen. Give them what you didn't have and what you've learned since then. In other words, simply is, I don't have to buy all these Christmas gifts for these kids and their toys, because most of those toys are played with for about a month or two and they're discarded because they're not entertaining anymore. And they're not. I can remember having these toys that I wanted, and by a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, I'd lose interest in it. It didn't pertain to me. It didn't have any interest in it. It didn't spur on what I would call being imaginative. I think another thing I've learned from a young lady, as she shared with me, is that later on in life, and I know it's even in my own life, she had an interest in going and being in a beauty pageant. And one parent said she's not the right person. You're not this particular person. you're too short. Yeah, that's really critical. That can really destroy a child or a young teenager when the mom or dad doesn't support their children. I know that even for me as a teenager, my dad came to only one game when I played basketball. He never spent time. He was too busy. You see, he never, he never asked me how the game went or anything of that nature. He was in his own world. You see, and these are critical things for you as young parents or people who are having kids. Um, you know, when you have this, you have children. You're responsible, but you're also responsible to love them. And when you don't encourage them or help them to believe in their dreams, you actually you're in the way. And so you cause them to not live or give up on their hopes because you're the key. You see, a child itself, a baby, is dependent upon you. Mothers who breastfeed their children, and I would encourage that too. You need to breastfeed your children. And I wholeheartedly believe that simply is if you would simply have your children at home, you give that child a 99% chance of success because that child is no longer in the system. So he's not on the tax rolls with the birth certificate. You're saying simply as I take responsibility to have my kids at home, and I'm going to have them at home, and I'm going to eat healthy and do the right thing for my baby boy or baby girl when I'm pregnant, and not do stupid things like drinking alcohol or smoking is detrimental to the child's health. And if you're not going to take that responsibility, it's best you don't have kids, period. It is. If you're not going to take responsibility and be the type of parent you need to be, and that's the reason why you don't need to have any traumas in your life. You need to deal with them. And so that you're not dependent on alcohol or some other substance to quote unquote get you through the day. Because that has enormous effect upon the child. And it's critical for that child to know that you love them and you're not doing that. See, it takes you, when you have a child, simply as that eliminates the selfishness on your part because that child needs you. And many mothers they get pregnant for basically just because they think this is going to solve another problem. And they create a bigger problem because they're not willing a lot of times to love that child. And they bring in their attitudes from their parents. They create the world that they lived in and create that for their children. Do you follow what I'm saying here? Do you understand when you do those things and you don't care and you're not willing to eliminate your own selfishness, then it's best that you don't have kids. It is. And so having kids is a responsibility, and you got to love them. You're going to have deep love for them from your heart. And there are going to be times that they're going to disappoint you, but you have to be the constant light in their lives, and you need to be a constant encouragement to them in their lives, not pointing out all the bad things they do, because simply you do the same thing that's happened to you. You'll blame them and you'll shame them and you'll try to create guilt in their lives too because you didn't deal with it yourself. So that's critical that you understand that. And some may say that's pretty hard-hearted. No, it's not. You see, that's why you need to make sure that who you marry is truly someone you're in love with. But not only that, do they have character themselves also? And do you have character? That do you tell the truth? And that your responsibility as an adult is that do you have a correspondence with your male or female partner to tell the truth? Because if you're lying to them, you're lying to yourself. And I'm not going to, I'm not playing games here because I grew up in certain situations. I grew up in a Christian family, but my parents were not always honest. And my mom, my dad had traumas themselves, and they had not dealt with. And so they passed them on to you. You see, and you're not aware of that. A child doesn't know how to handle that thing. Doesn't know how to understand how to defend itself in those situations. How could it? And so it's critical that you understand simply these things, that you protect them. And I see this over and over as I go into grocery stores these days. In the past year, this crazy pandemic, which is not a pandemic, it's just simply a mind controlling system that's going on, and most people don't have the gumption to see it for what it is. It's putting you in a box, and you're going along with it because simply you don't have the balls or the responsibility to do the right thing. So I see parents they're traumatizing their children with mask on, wearing masks. You're traumatizing your child when you do that. The important thing simply is that Janice Barcella speaks about simply is this. When a child comes out of the womb, it's looking for already to make eye-to-eye contact with the mom and the dad. And when you do that, proper thing is right. When you do that, it's correct. But if you're wearing a mask, you're doing something detrimental to your child. You're introducing trauma into their lives. And if you're sending them to school, you're also traumatizing them by others who are also been traumatized. There's children in the classroom. And if you don't have the gumption to do what's right, you're messed up. Because it's your responsibility not only to have a child, protect him, but it's not to traumatize them. And that's what's going on right now. You're traumatizing these kids. These kids are now already bought into the system because it's been over a year. It's been going on. So what happens simply is they don't take their mask off, even if their mom does. I watched this yesterday as I went in a restaurant, and the mom comes in with no mask on, and her children are wearing masks. Now, I didn't check, but I assume basically after they got something to eat, I heard them eating, and talking, so they took their mask off. This is a serious, crazy world we live in, and this is one thing you've got to stand up for, is to yourself and for your children to actually don't wear a mask. This is all fear porn, folks. And no wonder children are also traumatized, far worse than I was, or someone even now is 30 years old, far worse now than they were now. Now it's the worst. You wearing a mask? I watch them go in, and the kids are wearing masks, and their daddy and mommy's wearing masks. This is all fear porn. This is a lie. And you are not willing to stand up because simply as you're a part of what I call groupthink, and you cannot stand on your own. So you allow the pressure from someone. This is peer pressure, but as an adult, you shouldn't even have peer pressure. But it is. You see, there's pressure from the Joneses that you have to have this type of car or this type of house you have to live in to look great in somebody's eyes. So you're already, in some ways, thinking that it's all the outside, it's the image that counts, when in reality, that's nothing but a facade. It's a lie. But you buy into this, and so you're not capable of standing on your own. I was talking to another lady the other day, also that I made friends with, and she told me simply that she got along with. She didn't just went in certain cliques in high school. That she was in every clique or whatever. She was just kind of like a social butterfly, I guess. In some ways, would be, mingle with certain people, and then mingle with somebody else. So she didn't just simply stay in one particular group, which I thought that was kind of wise in doing that and not being a clique. And that's part of it. If you did that in high school, simply as you were in a clique loop, you couldn't associate with what we call the rednecks or the, studious ones or whatever. You felt like you had to fit in a certain deal here. Well, then you realize simply as you're already in groupthink. And so if you cannot stand on your own in those days, and see, today I noticed that as I was thinking about it, my parents and what transported with them, many young people are in enormous debt. They buy a brand new house, before they're 30. And they have kids. And both partners work. You think you're, quote unquote, someone's going to take care of them or love them, your children? You're fooling yourself. I know that for myself, we had babysitters when I came home from school, so roughly 3:30 to 4 o'clock till whenever my parents came home to pick us up, that is from the other person. So it's usually an hour and a half or 2 hours at the max. But there are people now simply as they're working all the time and they don't even think about it. They take them to a babysitter that's a school, so to speak, and they pay these people money to babysit their kids because they're in so much debt that both of them have to work. That's not love, folks. And I don't care what you think about me. This is the truth. If you are so busy in those things and you got to be somebody else and you got to have what the Joneses have, you're lost. You're totally lost. And if you have kids, you're in worse shape. Because they're depending upon you as a parent. And you say, well, I have to have these things. Oh, really? You have to have these things. You have to have a brand new house. You have to have brand new cars. No, you haven't grown up. It's the problem. You haven't grown up. You just give excuses. So you think, and this is the other thing, you think someone can teach your child to a person you've never met before. That is, you send them to public school or even private school. You haven't even met the teacher that teaches your child. And you believe that they care about your child. You live in a silly dream, folks. No one's going to love your child except you. And if you can't provide that love, who is? You live in a daydream. And reality simply is you're creating a nightmare for your children. I wouldn't be spending my time here sharing with you about this out that I felt so important that it needs to be conveyed to people who are younger than me. You need to change. You need to realize simply is it ain't about what you got here. You're not going to take anything with you when you're gone. You're not going to take none of it with you. It's only going to matter what you do or help your child to experience love. And if they don't experience love, they're going to go out and make the same mistake you're making now. Because they follow your habits. They think they're getting love. They think they're getting true love from you, but deep down, they know they're not. And so they don't have someone who they can respect. And yet they don't know anything, so they make the same mistake you make. And it just keeps going and going. It just gets worse. Because there are less and less parents who really actually love their kids. Mommy and daddy are always working. Oh, they're helping you, and they'll always say, because they feel guilty, and rightfully so. Well, I'm doing this simply as to, for the kids. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're lying to yourself. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it because simply as you are insecure and that you have to put this facade on, and so you have to have some great house, nice house, brand new cars, which basically in a lot of ways your car is one of your worst investments, especially if you get a new car. You lose 15 to 20% once it leaves the parking lot, folks. It's one of the worst investments you could ever make. It's not even an investment. But this is what everybody's buying in the trends. So everybody watches TV. These are the new trends. So I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that, such and such. And there's no money saved up for the future neither. You see, it's all put on credit cards. And then you put yourself in more debt. And you put yourself in more servitude. When in reality simply is you can have your children at home and not put your children in servitude. And you could keep yourself out of servitude also by simply as I'm taking responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for my life. I'm not going to have health insurance, you see. I'm not going to have this government influence type of deal. They're going to say, here, pay such and such amount of money, take it out for me. Because then what happens simply is you don't take responsibility. You say, oh, they'll pay for my bill. And that's what 99% of the people do. When are you going to be the 1%, folks? You see, all these things are happening. There's pressure put upon you in society, such and such, is to, quote unquote, to find out what kind of man are you, what kind of woman you are, what type of character you have, what kind of integrity you have. Are you true to your word? You see, that's what's going on, why it's happening. Enormous pressures put upon you, because the reality simply is, what are you really? What are you like when no one sees you? Because of what you put out here, most people are putting out a facade. They are acting a certain way, and they think they're fooling the world, and they may be, but they're also fooling themselves. And that's the sad situation, because simply if you fool yourself, then you're the fool. And there's no one to blame but yourself. So I asked, sometimes you look into Janice Barcelo, if you really truly want to have your children to be free, you need to watch some of her videos. You need to have your kids at home. You don't need to have them in a hospital. They do deadly things and do bad things to your children in the hospital. Are you well aware of that? Are you well aware that simply they circumcise boys? Sometimes they do it without even the parents' knowledge. Are you aware of that? Are you? Really? You realize that simply these are corporations, folks. And these people work for a corporation. The nurses, the doctors, And eventually, if they want to keep their jobs, they don't talk about things. They keep their mouth shut. So reality simply is they're not looking out for your interests at all, because they are themselves in debt, and they themselves are in the same situation you're in. They're just another slave on the plantation here. And you keep going along with it, and you think other people are different than you, and they're not. You're simply manifesting the type of life you want, and you're getting these people in your lives because you don't have the courage to do the right thing. And so you go out and you take your pregnant wife and you go to hospital. And a doctor simply does things to you that most men don't do to their wives. And then he sets out this whole thing, the schedule out when your baby will come. And then they say, oh, you can't have a normal birth, so they have to do a C-section, which is crazy, which is nothing about money. But they'll use this fear factor and saying, hey, your child, this might be dangerous for your child, such and such. Who knows if they're telling the truth? Who knows if they're telling you simply if you have a certain disease or not? The third leading cause of death in America is in a hospital when people make mistakes. I know that I went to the dentist about 6 months ago, and they were pointing to, we're going to take this tooth out over here. And I said, no, you're not. It's over here. And I had to be very straight to them and say, no, you're not, because this is the tooth you need to take out. Now, if I'd have been under what I call, this is how mistakes are made, folks, just little things like that. I wonder where people's minds are at when they make these decisions, such and such. I remember going, I knew another lady who was what they call a pharmacist, a floor pharmacist. Her job was simply this, and I'm making it very clear to you folks, very clear. Worked in Augusta, Georgia. The Augusta, Georgia is considered one of the major hospital centers, medical centers in the Southeast. There's 6 or 7 hospitals in the city of Augusta, Georgia. Her responsibility was this: to make sure that the doctor wrote the right prescription for the right deal. In other words, for if you had a situation and he prescribed a certain drug, her job was to look at the records and see all these things and say, did he make a mistake? Did he have the right amount? In other words, how many cc's or whatever particular drug they're using to make sure he doesn't make a mistake. Isn't that scary? And they paid her good money to do that. That was on a floor. Okay? That's not on the whole hospital, folks. That's just on a floor. So we say the 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 1st floor, whatever. People are in a hospital. And her job was to make sure the doctor did not prescribe the wrong medicine. And then if it was a medicine, what was the correct amount to give? Because of doctor errors. I'm not joking with you folks. One of the worst things you could do is to go to the hospital. I understand simply when it's an emergency, but they make mistakes, folks. They make them. And the problem is they don't pay for them. I've always knew a guy who came to the business where I worked at, and he was always supportive simply as I had back injuries all my life because I was injured in a car accident. And I was going to a chiropractor every now and then. And he had a back problem, and he chose to go the other route. He chose, instead of using a chiropractor, he chose to do a surgeon. And that surgeon made a mistake. That surgeon cut a nerve. So the man is no longer in pain, but he can't do the things he used to do, like use his legs. That's what doctors do. They make mistakes, folks, and they don't pay for them. The patient pays for them, and they also have to pay the bill. You follow? So it's important that you understand simply is to take the responsibility to have your children at home, not in some medical facility, because they don't see you as a person. They see you as a number. They see you as, if you know, the first thing you walk into a hospital for, where's that insurance card? That's the first thing they want to know, because they don't want. That's wrong, but they want to make sure they're going to get paid. So I hope that what I've shared with you is why it's so important to love your children, your kids. Because one day you have them and the next day they're already gone. 18 years, 20 years, whatever, they're gone. And your opportunity to have enormous impact upon them, positive or negative, is over with. So think about that deeply. I appreciate your attendance and appreciate your attention also, and wish you a good day. Take care.